We are here and we're going to talk a little bit of roundtable on several different things in sports tonight. We recapped baseball and basketball on Sunday. So we're going to talk a little bit of a recap with players of the week in baseball and basketball. Then we're going to get into with spring football around the corner. We're going to get into some football discussion, college football discussion with that. And then we'll close it out again with some discussion with some stuff that's happening with NCAA legislation and that type of stuff. So, Sweets, you want to kick us off with baseball, basketball recap?
Sure, yeah. So my player of the week for NCAA basketball is Jordan Riley, guard from East Carolina. Jordan averaged 29 points a game last week, 8 boards, 4 steals on 51.4% shooting from the field. Shot over 60% from three, and was at 76.2 from the line. So he had a hell of a week. Uh, Career high against UTSA with 31 points for the senior, and it's the second time this year that he's recorded 6 steals in the game too. So just an incredible effort by Riley this week. They won both of their games, and the Pirates haven't had a good season, but Riley's played really well. And it's too bad that he's going to go out on this note. But if he's able to continue to perform as he does, perhaps he can. He's got a little pro ball ahead of him down the road. Kev, who's your player of the week?
So in hoops, I'm going to go with Brandon Burries from Arizona State. They had a big win against Kansas this past weekend, and he averaged 22 points for the last week, 8 rebounds, and 4.5 assists. Arizona's established themselves, in my opinion, as a definite top 4 team. If I was going to, roll with 3 number 1 seeds, I would put Michigan, Duke, and Arizona as a for sure 3, and then battling it out with Florida and UConn. I think those are definitely the top 5 teams. Arizona's freshman class, just again, really good. And again, this total freshman class is really good. And is definitely one of the better freshmen in this group. So outstanding week by him. They beat Kansas by 18. Arizona continues to climb. So he would be my hoops player of the week. What about college or SEC baseball? What do you got in SEC baseball?
My SEC baseball player of the week, big pardon, is Brendan Lawson from the University of Florida. Lawson went 8 for 14 last week for an average of 571. Had 2 bombs, 1 double, and 12 RBIs. Fantastic week. He drew 2 walks, was hit by a pitch twice. So he was on base all weekend long. Had 3 starts at shortstop and was 6 for 6 in fielding percentage. So he's been fantastic. He is the number 2 prospect in Major League Baseball for hitters in this year's draft. Sophomore from Toronto, Canada. Not a lot of those guys floating around in college baseball with the bigs, but this kid he just flat can hit. And looking forward to seeing how he closes it out at Florida. But I'll be glad if he goes ahead and gets drafted, so we don't have to see him again down the road. Kev, who do you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Josh Gunther from South Carolina. He started Friday night for him. So South Carolina lost James McCoy, their preseason Friday night starter, hurt his arm, UCL surgery before the season. And Gunther's a Wake Forest transfer. He was a closer at Wake Forest, had a 190 batting average against him last year. Thought he would be the closer at South Carolina. They needed a Friday night guy. They penciled him in Friday against Clemson. He pitched 7 innings, gave up no runs, 10 strikeouts. So to me, he's emerged as the potential Friday night starter for them, and they certainly needed it. Paul Mainieri needs all the support he can get. He took a big transfer portal class, and Gunther's got a good arm. He's proven. He's just stepping into that role as a starter. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he does the rest of the way as a starter, and if he can stay consistent and emerge as that Friday night guy. So moving from there, we're going to go into our spring college football top 5. So, Sweets, who you got for your top 5?
This is way, way, way too early, but here we are. It's never too early to talk football in the South, so
No.
we all know that. So I'll go ahead and start at 5. At number 5, I've got LSU. I think that Kiffin, with the portal class that he got and some of the returning talent that they have, it's just a matter of putting it together and molding it on the field. If the coordinators can come in and get these guys playing to their potential, LSU's got all the talent. They've got the talent to contend for a national title. But putting it together and actually, getting it done is another thing. I got them at number 5. At number 4, I've got Texas and Arch Manning. Texas is loaded. Texas is another team that all top 5 teams have the talent to win a national title. But with Arch Manning, Simmons on defense, all that kid does is sack quarterbacks. They've got a ton of talent. The thing that scares me about Texas is Sarkisian. He's been a coordinator on some teams that have won it all, but he's never been the head man, and that's a lot of pressure. It's a different type of pressure going from a coordinator to a head coach. So until he actually gets it done, I'm kind of on him. At number 3, I've got Indiana. They're the defending national champion. Brought in another large portal class. Let's see if he can strike gold 3 times. I mean, Cignetti went from 2-10. He bought a 2-10 team, came in, got to the playoff 2 years ago. This last year, he won a national title with 2 great transfer portal classes. His coordinator's fantastic, and they don't have the most talent, but these guys play as a team, and they are the epitome of coordinators coaching the kids up and putting them in the right position to make plays and win ball games. So they've been fantastic. At number 4 or number 2, I beg your pardon, I've got Ohio State. Ryan Day has won it all, had the talent to win it all this year, got tripped up. But the talent is there at Oregon State or Ohio State. The one thing I'm curious to see is how much they're going to miss Brian Hartline. Hartline's been a fantastic coach for Ohio State for years, and he took a head job this year. So I'm curious to see how his loss will affect the Buckeyes, and I think it's going to have a big effect on them. And for my number 1 team, I've got the Georgia Bulldogs. Gunnar Stockton's a senior now, or maybe he's a senior. He might get another year or 2 to play with today's NCAA rules. I don't know. I think he's a senior though, and he's a great leader. His teammates love him. They look up to him. He's the man in the locker room. But talent-wise, this is the year that Georgia's defense bounces back and is what they were a few years ago when they were winning national titles. They were young. They had a ton of freshmen and sophomore talent on the field last year, and those guys all they've done is develop and get better. And if Georgia can stay healthy, the only thing stopping them is themselves. So there's my top 5 for the spring, and you could ask me next week, and that might change, But that's the top 5 today. Kev, who do you got?
And we'll do this again, so we'll certainly give it the opportunity to change. So you had 2 teams in your top 5 that I didn't have. You had LSU and Indiana, so we can kind of bounce those around too. So I'll start with 5, and I'll go. I have Ohio State there. They had a really good season last year. Didn't have a lot of proven wins. They did beat Texas early, game 1. That Texas team was not the same at the end of the season, though. So I just referenced that to say the way that Ohio State kind of finished the season, losing to Indiana in the Big Ten championship and then losing to Miami in the playoffs. I want to see them beat a good team before I rank them any higher than 5. So I'm going to go Ohio State 5. Julian Sand returning at quarterback. Will he make a big progression and take them to a higher level? Number 4, I'm going to go Georgia. You mentioned Stockton. I really like him. I think the interesting thing about Georgia was they took some portal transfers, but they really focused on signing their guys. So that tells me, Kirby knows talent. Yes. That tells me that Kirby likes his guys that he has. And so he put an emphasis on bringing back his players. He had very few people transfer out. So I like Stockton. I like who they've got coming back on defense. I don't think, I think the biggest thing that they're going to have is some wide receivers emerge. They got tight ends. Their offensive line is going to be really good. They've got running backs, maybe the best safety in college football. And their linebacker room's always stacked. So Georgia, I would put it 4. Notre Dame, I'm going to go 3. Here's one that I had that you didn't put in, and I really like C.J. Carr, and I really like how they finished the season last year. You got to, the last 2 months of the season, Notre Dame just rolled through people. And I really think they'll continue to progress. They bring a lot back on defense. They bring, good offensive back. They'll have one of the best offensive lines again. And I think C.J. Carr is one of the best leaders. We referenced Stockton. I put Carr in that same type of quarterback, and that he's just going to find ways to win. I like their coordinators with Denbrock, and of course, Freeman pretty much calls the defense there too. So I like Notre Dame with what they have. I think they're going to be a tough team to beat. So I rank them number 3. Then my top 2 teams, I would say, are the teams that bring back the most. When you just look at the talent and the production that they bring back from last year. Number 2, I have Oregon. And again, they bring back a lot. I think, I think they're going to be the best team in the Big Ten next year. And I don't think, it'll be close, honestly, with those teams. Indiana's there, Ohio State's there, but both those teams lost players. Oregon's bringing back pretty much all their production. So I really like Oregon here to take the next step and potentially get to the national championship game next year. And then number 1, I'm going to go with Texas because I just don't think there's a more talented team than Texas, especially when you look at positions. I mean, quarterback Arch Manning, he played really well to close the season off. So I think he's going to continue to make strides and be one of the best quarterbacks next year. Wide receiver, they took the transfer from Auburn, Coleman, who's a great wide receiver. Colin Simmons on defense, the best pass rusher in college football. And, and again, the Wake Forest tackle that they took solidifies their offensive line. They've got 2 NFL tackles potentially there. And then they also took the running back Hollywood from North Carolina State that transferred to Alabama and ended up at Texas. So I think just based on their roster alone, Texas has got to be preseason number 1 just on the 5-star talent that they've got. I do agree with you, though. Sark has been there in the playoffs, but he's never got past that semifinal round, even though he had talented teams. So to me, he does have to prove himself when he gets in that moment, kind of like Kirby had to prove himself, and he finally did. Will he make that step? And another interesting thing to me for Texas that I would not say is a positive, they fired their defensive coordinator, hoping that would get them over the hump this next year. And, he had a lot of success at Texas, but they let him go, and they brought in Will Muschamp, who, he's still been around the game, but he's not been a coordinator in a couple of years. So, and I question whether that's the right move because he's a good coach. So I'm not trying to take that away from him. He'll be a good, solid defensive coordinator. But the game has changed a little bit since he was an elite offensive coordinator. There's definitely more options to the passing game. Of course, Muschamp always believed in putting pressure on the quarterback. But I just think that's going to be an interesting thing for Texas. Can he call the defense well enough, lead that defense to win them a national championship? But those would be my top 5. You mentioned LSU. I love their talent. Love Kiffin. Love what they have at coordinators with Weiss and Baker. So I think they could emerge into the top 5, and the next time we do this, they may be. But I want to give that team – they took a lot of portal guys, so I want to give that team a little bit of time until we hear about some chemistry. And then you mentioned Indiana, and you're right. There's not been a team better with execution the last 2 years than them. And where they've been really good is the offensive and defensive line for 2 straight years. This year, their skill position people were a little better, and that led them to the national championship. But line of scrimmage, they've been very good. I think, again, though, they lost a lot of 6 and 7 year guys. I think their average age was 23 last year. I think that's going to be hard to replace. That being said, Cignetti's a good coach, so you certainly it's not as he says he's got the receipts. When he went to Indiana, he didn't have a doubt he was going to win. When they announced him the night at the basketball game, he referenced Purdue. We want to beat Purdue, but then he said we want to beat Michigan and Ohio State also. Some people might not have believed him that night, but he certainly did. So those would be my top five. Anything else you want to say about top fives?
Let me add something. First of all, Notre Dame's going to be top five, okay? And they they're probably a close to a top five talented team. Freeman, I like Freeman as a coach and everything, but listen, I mean, the schedule that they play is embarrassing. They play two, maybe three teams that'll be ranked next year. And I know that people say, oh, well, you only play who they put in front of you. Well, Notre Dame gets to choose their schedule because they refuse to join a conference. So you're able to pick and choose who you play against. You can coach yourself to 10, 11 wins a year without really trying. And then, unless you just spit the bid on a game that you shouldn't have. See Northern Illinois a few years ago. So that happens. But when you're scheduling, these teams, they just got to do better. Notre Dame just needs to join a conference and get with the program like everybody else in college football. Stop being greedy, and because that's what it's all about is money. Notre Dame doesn't want to share their piece of the pie, and greed is one of the seven deadly sins. So, you join a conference.
I do agree they need to join a conference, and they certainly put the pressure on themselves with their schedule next year. I do think they get Miami at home. I can't remember if they play Texas A&M next year or not.
Yeah, they've their other tough game will be BYU.
Yeah, that's right. It's BYU because they played at A&M 2 years ago. So they host Miami and BYU, and that's really it. So the schedule's weak. So I look at that, and they pretty much have to go 11-1. They could go 10-2, but they're not going to get in over other 10-2 teams with that schedule. Now they do have it this year where if they're ranked in the top 12, they have to be one of the teams. Whereas last year they were ranked in the top 12 and they didn't. That being said, it doesn't bother me that the Power Fives need to go. It needs to be from the Big Four conferences and potentially a Notre Dame if Notre Dame plays well enough to get in there. But I totally agree. It's time for them to join a conference. The perfect conference for them to join lines up with their academics and everything is the Big Ten, and that not just for Notre Dame, to me for the Big Ten, because I look at an Ohio State this year. You can play in the Big Ten, and if you get the right draw, you only play one or two good games there too, because you got Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, occasionally Nebraska.
Yeah, Penn State was trash this year.
Yes, they were. Iowa can be pretty competitive, but then that bottom part of that league, Maryland, Rutgers, Purdue, Northwestern is somewhat competitive, but take that for what it's worth. They're not elite. Michigan State's not elite, or they haven't been the last few years.
Purdue.
So Notre Dame should join the Big Ten, strengthen that conference, and that way it's definitely good at the top. They've won 3 national championships in a row. So not saying it's not good at the top, just the depth of the league, and it would help. The depth of their league, and then it would also help Notre Dame too. So good point there. Definitely agree with you. They need to join a conference and be like everybody else. And I was glad, to be honest, that the committee did what they did, and it proved out right. Miami made a run and went to the national championship. So Miami was the team that deserved to be in. From there, let's go to coaches on the hot seat. And let me say this. Nobody predicted coaches on the hot seat better than we did last year. When we started putting coaches on the hot seat, they went, and we were early with Gundy. He went. We were early with Pittman, and those guys left. So not that I'm proud to predict people losing their jobs, by no means. But these next two groups that we're going to talk about, coaches on the hot seat and coordinators that we feel like can get a head job, we did as good a job as anybody last year with these predictions. Who do you feel like are some early coaches on the hot seat?
Early coaches on the hot seat. Well, first of all, the most obvious one is Mike Norvell. However, Florida State has told the world that they are $400 million in debt, and I believe Norvell's buyout is $50 million plus. So while his effort, I mean, not the effort. Let me rephrase that. His record has been awful recently, but I don't know if they can afford to let him go without negotiating it down or something like that. But his performance lately has definitely put him square on the hot seat. Luke Fickle, Wisconsin. I didn't even think he'd be back to have a job this year. But again, I think it's one of those things where Wisconsin doesn't want to pay the buyout. And, so they're just going to try to ride it out for another year and see if he catches fire. And the thing about it is that, I mean, Norville was, had Florida State in position to play in the national championship just a few years ago. Luke Fickle was a fantastic coordinator that everybody, he was one of the guys that everybody wanted as a head coach the year that he, went from being a coordinator. And, Wisconsin has just not been good there. Dave Aranda, another wonderfully talented coordinator who won a national championship at LSU in 2019. His first season at Baylor was fantastic. He won the title there, not a national title, but the conference title. But since then, it's been downhill. They've got a new AD in town who is not the one who hired Aranda. So when you get a new AD in and you're not performing well, those guys usually want to bring their own guy in. A few other guys that may not be, Mike Locksley at Maryland, as you referenced, Maryland being at the bottom of the Big Ten, and he's been there for 4 or 5 years now. They're not getting any better. Shane Beamer at South Carolina, he was talked about as possibly going back to Vatech or whatever. Went 4-8 last year after having a pretty good year the year before. But people just don't have the patience that they do for these coaches anymore. And if you're not winning now, we'll get somebody in here who does. A few other guys, maybe Lincoln Riley, but again, another large buyout. And he has the talent there at USC to turn it around, but he needs to get it done. Kev, what are your thoughts on the hot seat?
So my first coach that I would throw on the hot seat is Bill O'Brien at Boston College.
Amen.
He's struggled, and I think if he doesn't have a winning record and get in a bowl game this year, I think he's probably the first one out. He's just fitting. Guy that's he's had numerous jobs. He was head coach at Penn State, went to the NFL, offensive coordinator at Bama, bounced around. I think it's time he's got to step up and do something, or he will be definitely a coach that would Boston College will be looking for somebody else. You mentioned Beamer. I think Beamer's definitely on the warm seat. And I just want to talk about him just for the reference of you reference fans are not patient, and they're not. Alumni, money people are not patient at all. So if you're a head coach, you better make sure when you hire a coordinator that it's the right guy. Because 2 years ago, Shane Beamer won 9 games, was right there. People were talking about him winning 8 or 9 last year, bring their quarterback back, got a lot of talent. And he hired Mike Shula as offensive coordinator, and one of the worst offenses in college football, and won 4 games. So yes, I do think he's on the hot seat. I don't think it's burning, but I just reference him for college coaches better make wise decisions when they're hiring coordinators in today's game, because you make one bad hire and you're the next person out the door after that coordinator that you let go. From there, I would go with Fickle. Again, he's got to prove himself this year. Wisconsin, I give them credit for stepping up and saying that they didn't make the investment in the NIL, and they said before they're going to make a change, they're going to give him a year with that investment. So they want to invest in players and see if that turns it around. He was a very good coordinator, and then went to Cincinnati, did a great job there, got Cincinnati in the playoffs. Everybody thought he would do well at Wisconsin. But again, in the era of NIL, if you don't have money backing you, it's hard to get the players. So he's definitely there on the hot seat. He's got to produce because they are paying players this year. Mike Locksley at Maryland, he seems to just kind of do just enough each year, but he stays on the hot seat. Got a good freshman quarterback though, so maybe he can continue to win enough games. It seems like if he can win 6 or 7 and get him in a bowl game, that keeps him out of keeps him off the pink slip line. And then you mentioned Norvell. Norvell's definitely on the hot seat. It's just a question of that money situation. And, you got people jumping ship with Norvell. I mean, you've got Gus Malzahn went ahead and retired because I don't think he wanted the headache of, being there through a season that could be tumultuous. And that puts it back on Norvell to call the plays. While he did a good job at Memphis calling plays, 2 years ago they struggled offensively. So I think that will definitely put him in right in the middle of that hot seat, because if he does not call an offense well this year, if they're not good on offense and they have another losing record, um, somebody in that donor base, I guess, will have to step up and pay. It's something. And I think they're a case study. We're going to talk a little bit about the NCAA and stuff. Florida State is a case study in what can happen if it all goes wrong, because they hit on the portal for 2 straight years, and then they gave Norvell a big raise, gave him, I think it was $8 million. That's why his buyout's still 50. When supposedly Alabama wanted to talk to him, and then they went out and again tried to win the portal battle. And the last 2 years, even though they've signed a lot of portal players, it's just they've not got the same results. So they, to me, being over 400 million in debt, are exactly what can happen if things go wrong. And I say that it can happen to a lot of teams.
Oh yeah.
It can happen to a good team, because they were a very good team that won 10 one year and then came back the next year and went 12-0, won the ACC championship with a backup quarterback, and from there it's just went straight downhill. So those would be my hot seat guys. Again, don't want this to happen to anybody, but I gotta say that I think probably 3 or 4 of these guys do probably end up out next year.
At least.
At least, yeah. And then so that would lead us, to the next group. And there'll be some up and coming coaches we'll talk about too. But another group we did a really good job with last year is coordinators. We hit on Kirby Moore, Colin Klein, Blake Baker was offered a head job. We named a lot of coordinators that were top coordinators, and they ended up getting head jobs this year. So that's our next group we want to talk about, is coordinators, offensive or defensive coordinators, that we feel like could take that next step and be head coaches. Sweets, who do you have for us here?
I think the most obvious one is Indiana defensive coordinator Bryant Haynes. He's been there for a few years now. They were 16-0 last year. Just let me give you some of the numbers, just to show you how well he did. He was number 2 in scoring defense, giving up 11.7 points a game. Number 2 in rushing defense at 77.2 yards a game. Number 4 in total defense, giving up 266 a game. Number 8 in third down defense, giving up 30.1% of their third downs, and number 2 in sacks with a total of 46 sacks. There are a bunch of other categories too that I could go on for another 3 minutes, going down the different individual stat categories that these guys were fantastic in. But the bottom line is that Haynes knows what he's doing. And here's the deal, is that Haynes he didn't have a bunch of 5-star NFL, guys out of high school that everybody knew who they were when they were 17 years old. He got these guys from all over the country. A few years ago it was, the guys from James Madison and stuff, and just the ability of Indiana's staff to, Haynes and Kev, I know you're going to call it their OC, but they have been so fantastic in their portal evaluations and then development, and that they've put on a master class the past 2 years. So Haynes is certainly at the top of my list. After that, I beg your pardon. After that, I'm going to go to D'Anton Lynn, who's at Penn State now. I believe that's correct. He was the past few years out on the West Coast at UCLA and USC, and every year his defense, improved. He went from 87th at UCLA to number 10 in one season. Just jumps like that will get you on the radar quick. And, fortunately it's wild because everybody knows that Lincoln Riley is an offensive guy. So you figure, an offensive guy with a great DC, he'd do well. Well, don't blame it on Lynn because Lynn's done a great job for USC's defense the
Yeah.
past few years. You got to look in the mirror, Riley. It's on you, buddy. After that, I'll go Jason Beck, offensive coordinator at Michigan, who's been with Kyle Whittingham and followed him from Utah to Michigan. Some of his rankings last year, he was number 5 in the country in scoring offense at 41.3 a game, number 4 in total offense at 482.9 a game, number 2 in rushing offense at 266.3 yards a game, and they have the Utes averaged 6.02 yards per rush. That led the country. An insane statistic, and he's been great everywhere. He's been at Virginia as the QB coach. He mentored Brennan Armstrong to the number 2 passing offense in the country. As QB coach and OC at Syracuse, they went from 108th to 45th nationally. And then his lone season at New Mexico, they ranked number 4 nationally in offense and number 5 in rushing offense. So these aren't historically great football programs that he's doing this with. So he's done a fantastic job, and he's certainly somebody who we're looking up to. I'll just name one more guy. We could go on all night with this, but I'll go ahead and call out because I know you don't have him on your list, Kev. I'm going to go ahead and say Glenn Schumann from the University of Georgia as the defensive coordinator. Their defense hasn't been as good as it was the few years of national championships with Dan Lanning and stuff, but they are young. They, like I said in my top 5 teams, Georgia's had a lot of freshmen and sophomores playing last year. Those kids are sophomores and juniors now, and they're loaded for bear. They've got a ton of defensive talent in position. They got a lot of defensive guys that would start anywhere else in the country that are backups at Georgia. So I really think that that Schumann is a big part of that, and that he will have an opportunity of his pick of jobs sooner rather than later. Kev, who do you have?
Yeah, so first I'm going to go with a guy that I know you like too, because we talked about these grouping. We had several of the same guys that we both like, and that's Charlie Weiss Jr. Did a great job at Ole Miss. I think in today's college football, if you're a good offensive coach that can develop quarterbacks, you put yourself in a position to be a head coach. And again, Kirby Moore and Colin Klein are examples of that. And I don't think there's anybody any better on that side of the ball and with quarterbacks than Charlie Weiss Jr. Kiffin gets a lot of credit, rightfully so, because he's always been good on offense. But Weiss proved once they got in the playoffs and he went back to Ole Miss that he played a big role in Chambliss's development and calling games and game planning. Flirted with, well, I wouldn't say flirted. That's not the right word. NFL teams flirted with him. There was an interest there for them and him. So, he's proven it. I think with a good year offensively, they had the number 1 ranked offense in the country last year. If they're a top 10 offense this year, I think Charlie Weiss Jr. is a head coach next year. And I think that'll happen. So I think we will see him land a job. Second, I will go with Mike Shanahan, the offensive coordinator at Indiana. Similar to Haynes, Shanahan's done just a really good job of coaching their team up. Offensive line play good, great running game, and good quarterback play. Coached a very efficient offense, and again got players in the portal coming next year. So Hoover, the quarterback from Tennessee or TCU that transferred is he the next guy that steps up in his offense? And to me, Shanahan's very proven. And I think there's a very good chance he's a head coach next year. Third guy, I'll mention someone that you didn't mention, and that's Corey Heatherman at Miami. I think he did a great job with their defense this year. Miami had one of the best defenses in the country, good at all levels. And once they got into the playoffs, their defense did a lot to carry them. That Ohio State game, they got the win there against them. Kept them in the game against Indiana, just couldn't quite get enough done there in that game. So, but a really good job that he did with their defense. And you mentioned Haynes. I'll just second him at Indiana. Don't necessarily have to say anything that you didn't already say. He just does a great job at the line of scrimmage and just really good job at execution. Secondary was good. They're good at all levels. And I think all these coaches that we've mentioned, they're not just good coordinators. They're very good game planners, and they coach. The units that they coach are good at all the positions. There's not a weakness in these groups. And I think again that's the way that today's college football is. If you're going to win, you got to be good at all levels now with the portal. You can't be a team that is just dominant with a running game or dominant with the defensive line and your secondary is a little bit suspect and you play a lot of zone. You got to be multiple on defense. You got to be multiple on offense. And these coordinators that we've mentioned have proven that they can do that. So I think again we mentioned coaches on the hot seat. I think probably out of these 7, 8 coordinators we mentioned, probably 4 or 5 of these guys have had jobs next year,
Oh
and I
yeah.
don't even doubt it at all. And even though I might not be as high on Schumann as you, I do think someone gives him a head job because it's proven. Lanning proved at Oregon. Kirby's guys get head jobs, so I think that is potentially out there for him. So just kind of go ahead.
He's he's a branch off the tree, off the Saban tree. He's he coached under Saban too. I mean, that it's these guys and the coaches that they've been around, like Cignetti, being around Saban. I'd bet you that 90% of the country didn't even know that Cignetti coached under Saban before
Correct.
before he hit it big. And that's the things that these guys will leave. They'll be with him for a few years. They'll leave and go to a small place where they're not very well known. They're not a coordinator necessarily, maybe a linebacker coach or something like Cignetti was. He wasn't the defensive coordinator for Saban. He was a position coach. And these guys, they go to other places and they get coordinator jobs and they get head jobs, and they just they know how to coach, and they know how to they know how to game plan. They know how to put that stuff together because they had such a great mentor. And I think that goes deep into who you hire as a coach. Not as deep as who but right there with it.
It's certainly the blueprint on how you set your organization up. And Saban used to talk about his process all the time. And, it's real. It's not just talk. It raises the floor for those teams. Those guys that coach under him know how to put a team together, and they know how to build their organization, their staff, their support staff better than anyone. It's proven. And so, yeah, Schumann will get something, just based on that, and they'll probably do well. So, that's the topics we're going to cover. Before we get off, there's a couple of interesting basketball games coming to the end tonight. Again, we talk about basketball and seeding purposes and teams on the bubble, teams not on the bubble. Texas A&M were probably just a hair on the bubble. Looks like they're going to beat Kentucky tonight. So Buckyball is going to get a big win. I don't know that puts Kentucky square on the bubble, but it certainly puts them in a situation where they need a win.
They can see the bubble from where they're standing.
That's right. They can see the bubble from where they're standing. That's exactly right. And then it looks like Georgia's going to get a big win over Alabama. And I say that they're up 9 with 3 minutes to go. So that's still enough time for Alabama, the way that they shoot the three, to come back and tie that game or get it into overtime. But Georgia, that would be a big win for them. They've won 20. So that would get them in the tournament again this year, I think, comfortably, if they win that game. So a couple of games there that are big games and tonight in hoops. Tennessee beat South Carolina. St. John's and Georgetown are in a tough game. That's an old Big East rival. And Carolina and Clemson are in a tough game. So, TCU is up 9 over Texas Tech at Tech after Tech has had the wins. TCU is a team that's on the bubble too. So that's that would be a win that could maybe get them in.
If they lose, that's going to hurt.
Yes. So Bama's made it 90-83. They've cut that lead to 7. So that's going to be an interesting finish there. Certainly not over. Yeah. I think A&M got confirmed control of that game with Kentucky.
North Carolina's up. It looked like they were up 4 over Wake.
Yes.
Or Clemson, actually, I beg your pardon. Virginia's up 9 over Wake. Still over 3 minutes in both of those games. So a lot could happen there. Florida's up on MooU by a dozen or so. I'm telling you what, we talked about it the other night. Florida Florida is playing as well as anybody in the country right now. Florida is not a team that you want to face in the SEC tournament or the Big Dance because they have got it going right now.
They certainly do. Well, that's all I've got. Yeah, well, no, hold on. We got one more thing we want to talk about. We don't need to leave this. So, again, the NCAA can't seem to get things right for years. Now, all of a sudden, they're trying to throw Hail Marys and try to make things happen. So, last week, there was some, we talked about the rules processes, but there was also some movement towards getting the government to do something to help them with the tax situation that they're in, to be able to put a salary cap in place. So again, everybody wants it. College coaches want it. Presidents want it. So Louisville's president wrote a letter to the NCAA and to Congress, trying to get something done towards legislation to help get the salary cap, get the tax exemption for that purpose. And then Trump said at the end of last week, our president said at the end of last week, he's going to put a committee together. Saban's supposed to be on it and others to try to get something done there. I don't, it's the government's not something that I put a lot of faith in getting something passed. Just like the NCAA, they both just tend to let things go. The one thing I will say though, if you get somebody like Trump behind something and Saban behind something, those are two people that believe in getting results. Whether you like them or not, they get results and they'll get something done. And so I got to have a little bit of faith that they'll do something. And it makes me feel good that Saban is going to be involved. I just hope that committee doesn't get too big because they need to push this through. Again, everybody wants it. You've got a situation right now where you have teams, and again, there's teams that we like that are doing this, but you got teams spending $40 million on a roster. So you created an elite 10 teams and the rest. And while I'm not someone that believes that you create equality, I'm not saying that at all. I just don't think it's a good place to where you have such large investments that, again, what if you end up like a Florida State? You're $400 million in debt because you have a couple of bad years of investments. And then all of a sudden, the alumni that spent that money, they're going to bail. Yeah. So it's just not a healthy way. It's not a sustainable way to win in college football. So I do think revenue sharing and where they're trying to go with this is the right way to do it. Create a field where that revenue sharing can pay for it, and you're not having to go out and tap alumni for big money. There's ways, and I think, there's schools that are doing other things to raise money, and I think that's very good. LSU has their show that aired on ESPN last year, different things like that. They have their contract with Nike. And so there's schools doing things like that. And I think that all can play a part in revenue sharing. So to me, excuse me, to me, it's good that there's doing something. Again, I've got to see it before it's done, but just want to mention that they're doing something. And I'm hopeful that by the end of next season that we have things in place, that we don't have to go through another year of the craziness that we have. They need to do one more thing, and that's fix the calendar. But we'll see. They're throwing a lot of things out there. Rules on tampering, we'll see. Are they going to do something? Are they going to get something done to get the tax exemption to put a salary cap in play? That would be great if they did. It's 2 or 3 years past late, but if they do, it'd be great. And then again, if they could get the calendar, it needs to go further into the spring. Really let kids transfer at the end of their second semester. Spring football, while it's important, you can be there all summer. Chambliss is an example. He wasn't there for spring ball at Ole Miss, and you can do that. This transferring in January where you've got all the bowl games still being played, the playoffs being played. It just needs to go past that. We need to get out of this window, right where you've got recruiting and all that. So that's my thought. That's my soapbox, my rant. What's your thoughts again on the NCAA and them finally trying to do something? I guess we'll see what they do.
Take NIL out of it. For all the other stuff, the NCAA has rules in place to handle all of it, every single thing. They just need to enforce the rules. Enforce the rules, and you'll be fine. NIL is a different game because they don't have rules because they never created them before they began NIL. They just said you can pay players now. Here you go. And I'm sure that the NCAA never dreamed that it would get to teams having $40 million salary cap, or not salary caps, $40 million rosters in college. But I mean, I don't see how they couldn't have seen it coming because, it's an arms race. It's an arms race. And whoever spends the most is going to have the most arms, which is going to increase their chances of winning. And if they win, that's just going to put more money into their coffers to continue to go and keep doing what they do. So for the NIL, I agree. They've got to do, they've got to have collective bargaining. They've got to sit down, and get some adults in the room. And, it's wild that, you're going to the U.S. government to be the adults in the room. But, having a guy like Trump, a guy like Saban, who you said, politics aside, like him, Hayden, whatever, they get stuff done. So at the end of the day, you need somebody who will go in, sit people down and say, okay, here's what we got, figure out how we fix it, and then most importantly, enforce it. I think once they get the enforcement down, they'll be fine. They don't have to go crazy and shut down programs and suspend coaches and this and that. Just enforce the rules you have on the books now and you'll be fine. And if teams continue to do what they've done, then you drop the hammer on them. But you can't, I find it a little, disconcerting that the NCAA says we've allowed you to do all this and have not done anything about it, but now we're going to come back and get you after the fact. You should have done that years ago and enforced it from the beginning, and you'd have never been in this position to begin with. So, for me, I have no love for the NCAA and how they run things, and I'm glad that they're getting somebody else involved. Hopefully they clean house at the NCAA and gets a regime change in there because, maybe Trump can go into the NCAA like he did Venezuela and sack. You can put Saban in there and let somebody with some common sense take over. But until that happens, they can talk all they want to, and I'm a results guy. Show me, don't tell me about it. Show me what you're going to do, and we'll see if it happens or not.
Totally agree because, again, it's just been all talk in the last, from Mark Emmert to Charlie Baker, they've both been pretty inept. They've not got anything accomplished. So, yeah, they need to clean house there. And I totally agree with you. It's very disingenuous when you don't tampering. There's been rules against tampering and they don't touch it. Now all of a sudden they want to suspend a coach for half a year if they find you, doing it. But they did. I think it was at Oklahoma State that they put them on probation for tampering with a tennis team. Okay, not anything else. The tennis team, typical NCAA. We're going to go after, football. We're going to leave that alone. Basketball, we leave that alone. But we'll go get the tennis team somewhere. So, not a fan of it, but hopefully they do something because college sports needs some structure. All for the players getting paid, all for where the things are going. We just need some structure and some things to where it's sustainable and creates an environment that we don't have the craziness where you get a kid transferring and coaches are calling him into class and that kind of stuff. So
I'll put it to you like this, Kev. 10 years ago, if you would have said each kid will pay each kid $100,000 a year to play football, that people would have been like, holy, yeah, the players would have been like, hell yes, well, we want this, we'll take it. But we said 100,000, hold my beer,
right.
Now kids are making, what Mensa made, 8 million last year or something like that. I mean, it's just insane.
It is. And you got, players, the reason they're suing to try to get more years to be eligible simply because the money that's out there, it's two,
Why
$3
wouldn't you?
million,
What
$4
did
million.
TJ Finley say? Yeah, what did Finley say? He said it's the best thing. It's the best way I can support my kids. He's a seventh-year college football player who is the quarterback now for Immaculate Word or Incarnate Word. I beg your pardon.
Same
Sorry,
thing.
sorry to all you Incarnate fans. I apologize on the mistake. Don't send me nasty emails or texts or any of that. Or do go ahead. It doesn't bother me. But the fact of the matter is that this kid is now 24 years old, 25 years old. He's got 3 kids. And instead of getting a job and getting in the real world, he found another team to. And Incarnate Word is not paying millions of dollars. We talked about it before. I'd guess he's probably getting about 100,000, which he's happy with, and that's good money. Listen, he's 25 years old. $100,000 is a lot of money for a 25-year-old who's not playing professional football. So I get it. Why wouldn't he want to keep playing? All those guys, I understand why they do. I just and
But there's got to be a limit.
And the thing with Chambliss, with him being maybe a second round pick, he wouldn't make as much money this year as he would at Ole Miss. I mean, that's just insane in itself. Say, you know what, I'm not gonna go to the NFL because that second round money they're gonna pay me more in college. It's just a nasty, nasty taste in everybody's mouths.
It's again, there's got to be a limit. Chandler Morris is another example. His has not went to court, but much like Joey Aguilar, Morris is seeking a 7th year. It's crazy. Played 6 years, and his dad got the OC job at Clemson, so there's rumors that if he gets that 7th year, he's going to go play for his dad.
Yeah.
But again, you've played 6 years, and
Yeah.
he's claiming he wants a second redshirt year. You played 6.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, perhaps he had a little tickle in his throat like Chambliss did, and he can get that. Can he go back to that judge in Mississippi and have it done there? I know he doesn't play for them, but that judge seems to have a real soft spot in his heart for kids who had tonsillitis or whatever it was. Like I said,
That's right.
Most 3-year-olds, you give them a few popsicles in a couple days and they're fine. But Chambliss suffered for years. So it's really sad. Right. I'm glad he's recovered enough to play another year, his 7th year, and I'm happy for him.
Yep. Hopefully there's some sanity brought to where we're at. Well, that's all I've got. You got anything else, Sweets? Again, everybody like, subscribe, listen to us, listen to the shorts, put some feedback. Disagree, let's hear it.
We'll be back on Thursday with DMAC, and we'll bring you some more baseball talk. Big baseball weekend in the SEC on tap. Of course, this is the last week of for the major conferences in basketball before we go to the conference championships next week. So we'll have a lot of basketball as well. So hope y'all will tune in again, like, subscribe, follow, and participate. Hope to see you Thursday.